The morning began like any other in Pine Hollow, a quiet town nestled deep in America's rural center. The birds chirped, wind rustled through golden trees, and in the Thompson household, breakfast sizzled as Sarah flipped pancakes while her husband Mark checked the news on his tablet. Their children, 14-year-old Ellie and 10-year-old Jamie, bickered over the last chocolate chip pancake like it was a matter of national security. No one could have known it would be the last normal morning. Outside, the roads were strangely still. No school buses passed by. No dogs barked. And there were no voices on the sidewalk. Just a silence that stretched too long. Then came the emergency broadcast. Mark's tablet screen flickered before flashing red with a single, urgent message: National alert, stay indoors. Do not engage. Remain calm. Further instructions to follow. Sarah leaned over his shoulder. What does that mean? Is it a storm? A gas leak? But Mark was staring at the screen, frozen. The live news feed had cut to a shaky video from a phone. The footage showed a man staggering into traffic with torn clothes and blank, glassy eyes. He lunged at a driver who stopped to help, dragging him from his car. Then, static. The feed cut out. Jamie, watching from the doorway, asked, "Dad, was that man sick?" Ellie answered, "That wasn't sick. That was something else." Within an hour, their phones stopped working. No calls in, no texts out. The radio was all static. Television channels went dark one by one. Mark tried the emergency radio in the garage. It hissed and popped, then caught fragments of a broadcast: avoid contact with infected, symptoms include extreme aggression, shelter in place. That's when they knew. Something was very, very wrong. Mark and Sarah had always been practical. He was a mechanic, she ran a home business. They weren't survivalists, but they knew how to keep calm. Mark secured the windows with whatever he could find: plywood, furniture, even the dining room table. Sarah collected all their food, water, and medical supplies into the basement. They turned the once cozy storm shelter into their stronghold. Ellie helped without being asked. She packed flashlights, batteries, board games, and even her little brother's favorite plush bear, Mr. Buttons. Jamie asked 100 questions. Is it like a sickness? Can it come through the windows? Are Grandma and Grandpa okay? No one had answers. Only fear. By late afternoon, the silence outside was broken, but not by help. A low groan echoed down the street. Then another. And another. Mark climbed to the second floor and peeked through a slit in the boarded-up window. 5 figures were walking down the road. No, not walking, shambling. Limping with stiff, uneven steps. Some dragged their legs. One's head lolled to the side like his neck was barely holding it up. "Sarah," Mark whispered. "They're here." They watched as the group stumbled past the mailbox, slow but purposeful. One stopped, sniffed the air like a wild animal, then turned toward the house. Mark ducked. The figure came closer. It moved without hesitation, arms rising, hands curling like claws. It reached the porch and pressed its face against the glass of the front door. Not breathing. Not blinking. Then, a second figure slammed into the door beside it. The wood groaned. "They know we're here," Sarah said. That night, the family huddled in the basement. They didn't sleep. Not really. Ellie clutched a flashlight like a weapon. Jamie trembled in Sarah's arms. Every sound above them, a creak, a thump, the distant growl, made them flinch. Mark kept a baseball bat by his side and whispered prayers he didn't even know he remembered. Then, just before dawn, something crashed upstairs. Glass shattered. A low groan followed. Mark rose slowly, motioning for silence. "Stay here. Don't move." "Mark, no," Sarah whispered. You can't go up there. I have to see what got in. He crept up the stairs, one step at a time. The sound of something dragging across the floor met his ears. A shuffle. A snarl. He reached the top step and turned the corner. The living room was dark, the curtains torn. A figure stood in the kitchen doorway. Not a stranger. Not anymore. It was their neighbor, Mr. Brenner. But his eyes were clouded. His mouth slack. And his shirt was soaked with something dark and dried. Mark didn't call out. He knew, somewhere deep down, that Mr. Brenner wasn't Mr. Brenner anymore. He backed down the stairs, careful not to make a sound. And that's when the creature turned its head. It had heard him. End of part 1. Would you like me to continue with part 2? Mark's foot barely touched the second step before the creature lunged. He spun around and bolted down the basement stairs, slamming the heavy door shut just as the infected neighbor crashed into it from the other side. The wood shuddered under the impact, rattling the frame. It's inside. Mark whispered harshly. Mr. Brenner, he's not human anymore. Sarah gasped, wrapping her arms protectively around Jamie and Ellie, who stared in wide-eyed silence. Thud. Another impact. The door held. For now. We need to get out of here, Sarah said, voice shaking. We can't, Mark replied. There could be more outside. If we go now, we walk into the unknown. Staying isn't safer, Ellie muttered. If that door gives, we'll be trapped. Mark knew she was right. He'd hoped to stay quiet, wait it out, hope for rescue. But now it was clear, there would be no rescue. At least not anytime soon. They gathered in the center of the basement. Mark laid out the situation with calm, practiced words. We'll move at first light. Pack light. Just essentials. Food, water, clothes, anything that can help us defend ourselves. We'll try for the truck. If it starts, we drive north. There's a ranger station near Broken Pine. It's remote. Might still have radio contact. And if it doesn't start? Ellie asked. Then we go on foot. That night, no one slept. The sounds above grew worse. More feet. More dragging. Sometimes muffled thuds, as if the creatures were running into furniture or clawing at the walls in confusion. Mark feared they were learning. Not fast. Not smart. But persistent. At dawn, the house fell eerily quiet. Too quiet. Mark crept up the stairs again, slowly pushing the basement door open. He stepped into the kitchen, glass crunched underfoot, the front window shattered inward. The living room was trashed. Mr. Brenner was gone, but deep claw marks were etched across the walls. Something sharp. Something not entirely human. Clear, at least for now, he called softly. Within minutes, the family was packed. Mark carried a small toolbox and an old hunting knife. Sarah slung a duffel full of water, food bars, and basic supplies. Ellie had a crowbar. Jamie wore his school backpack, holding batteries, a flashlight, and Mr. Buttons. The front yard was empty, but stained. Dark streaks stretched across the driveway, and clumps of grass were torn up. There had been a struggle here. Mark motioned them toward the truck. Move fast. Stay low. They reached it. Mark slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. Click. Nothing. Again. Click. 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 Dead battery. Of course, Mark muttered, slamming the steering wheel. Sarah scanned the road. We walk. The ranger station is, 10 miles? Maybe 15, Mark said. But we stay on back roads. Main roads'll be chaos. They started down the street, sticking to the shadows. The town was a ghost shell. Lawnmowers sat idle. Bikes lay in driveways. Houses stood with open doors, like mouths waiting to swallow. Then Jamie stopped. "Do you hear that?" They all paused. A faint moaning, not behind them, but ahead. They ducked behind a bush as a figure stumbled around the corner. A young man, late 20s, bloody and limping. He wasn't infected. Not yet. But he looked panicked. He spotted them and whispered hoarsely, don't go that way. They're swarming the park. Hundreds of them." Mark crept forward. "What happened? What are they?" "I don't know," the man said, trembling. "I was at the community center. People got sick. Bit each other. Then, they just stopped being people. It spreads. Fast. I barely got out. We're heading for the ranger station. You should come with us." The man hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. My name's Daniel." With Daniel in tow, they cut through backyards, hopping fences and sneaking between sheds. Their goal was to avoid any major streets. But at the edge of Pine Hollow, they came across an abandoned patrol car. Its lights still blinked red-blue, casting eerie flashes on the pavement. Inside was an officer. Slumped. Still. Mark reached in slowly to check, just a body. He grabbed the flashlight and the emergency bag from the passenger side, then found a pump-action shotgun in the trunk. No shells. But then Daniel crouched beside the car and pulled a box from beneath the seat. "Ammo. We'll need it." "Let's move," Sarah whispered. "We've been out here too long." As they made their way into the forest road leading out of town, the sun began to rise. The trees offered shade, but also shadows. The woods were alive with faint rustles, low groans, and distant footsteps. Suddenly, Ellie froze. There, between the trees, 3 figures. Watching. Still. They hadn't noticed the family yet, but it was only a matter of time. Mark raised the shotgun slowly. "Don't make a sound," he said. "They're hunting." End of part 2. Would you like part 3 next? The morning light filtered through the thick canopy, casting dappled shadows on the dirt path. The forest road, once a peaceful shortcut out of Pine Hollow, now felt like a gauntlet. Mark's grip tightened around the shotgun as he scanned the tree line. Ellie crouched beside him, heart pounding in her chest. Jamie clung to Sarah's hand, his small fingers trembling. Daniel, still pale and shaken, followed closely behind. The 3 figures between the trees hadn't moved. Their faces were slack, eyes cloudy and vacant, something not quite alive, yet not entirely gone. "They're waiting," Mark whispered. "For the right moment." A twig snapped behind them. Everyone froze. Mark spun, gun raised, but no one emerged from the shadows. Just a gust of wind rustling leaves. "We can't stay here," Sarah said urgently. "If they're hunting, they'll circle around." Mark nodded. "We move. Slow, steady." They slipped along the path, careful not to make a sound. But as they passed the first figure, one head turned, just slightly. The dull eyes followed them. Ellie swallowed hard. "Keep going," Mark urged. Halfway through the woods, the path narrowed, funneling them into a small clearing. They stopped, catching their breath. Jamie whispered, "Are they coming?" Mark scanned all directions. No movement. But a faint growl echoed in the distance, a chilling reminder that they weren't alone. Daniel stepped forward, voice hushed. "There's a cabin about a mile ahead. I know it's abandoned. Might be safer than the woods." "Better than being exposed," Sarah agreed. They set off again, the forest closing around them like a dark cage. The sounds of their footsteps mingled with the distant moans of the creatures behind. Suddenly, a branch snapped loudly to their left. Mark whipped around. From the bushes emerged a figure, a young woman, ragged and pale, but alive. "Wait," she gasped. "Please, don't shoot." Mark lowered the shotgun cautiously. "My name's Lisa," she said, breathless. "I've been hiding in the woods for days. The town, it fell apart fast. Most didn't make it." Sarah stepped forward. "Do you know the way to the ranger station?" Lisa shook her head. "Too far to go now. But the cabin Daniel mentioned, that's where I'm heading. You should come with me." Mark studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right." We moved together. The group quickened their pace, hope flickering in their chests. But as they neared the cabin, the woods fell unnervingly silent. The trees loomed taller, shadows darker. Even the usual forest sound seemed muted, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Then the ground trembled slightly. Ellie stumbled. "What was that?" Before anyone could answer, a swarm of figures burst from the undergrowth, fast, aggressive, and numerous. The creatures no longer staggered, they charged. Mark fired the shotgun, the sharp cracks echoing through the trees. 2 creatures fell, but more pressed in. "Run!" Sarah screamed. The family scattered, darting toward the cabin. Mark covered their retreat, swinging the bat at anything that got too close. Ellie tripped, and a creature lunged. She screamed, but a sharp blow to its head sent it sprawling. Inside the cabin, the door slammed shut behind them. Breathing heavily, they barricaded the entrance with old furniture. The wooden walls shook under the pounding feet of the creatures outside. Mark counted silently. "We won't last long if they keep this up." Lisa scanned the room. "There's a basement. It might be safer." They moved quickly, descending into darkness. The basement was cramped but secure. Windows barred, the only light coming from Ellie's flashlight. Sarah sat with Jamie, trying to calm him. Mark checked their weapons. The shotgun was empty. The knife was dull. The crowbar heavy, but better than nothing. Lisa whispered, "We need a plan. We can't stay here forever." Ellie looked around. "What about the ranger station? Maybe someone's there. Someone who can help." "No one's coming," Mark said grimly. "We're on our own now." Suddenly, a faint tapping came from the far corner of the basement. Everyone froze. Tap. 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 Jamie whimpered. "What is it?" Mark stepped forward, heart pounding. He found an old trapdoor. The tapping grew louder. Mark pulled the door open slowly. A cold breeze swept up from below. From the darkness, a pair of eyes stared back. The basement had secrets, ones that might be even more dangerous than the creatures outside. End of Part 3. Mark's breath caught as his eyes met the pair of glowing orbs staring up at him from the depths of the trapdoor. The tapping had stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence. "Did you see that?" Ellie whispered, clutching Sarah's sleeve tightly. Mark swallowed hard and grabbed a flashlight, shining it down into the narrow hole. The beam revealed a steep wooden ladder descending into pitch blackness. The eyes blinked once, then disappeared. Lisa edged closer. "That's new. I didn't know this cabin had a basement." "Neither did I," Mark said grimly. "But right now, it might be our best option." Sarah looked hesitant. "Are we sure we want to go deeper underground? What if something else is down there?" "Better to find out now than be trapped upstairs with those things pounding on the door," Mark answered. He started lowering himself down the ladder first, carefully feeling each rung. The basement smelled damp and stale, a thick layer of dust blanketing every surface. As the family followed, Ellie shone her flashlight ahead, revealing old crates, broken furniture, and stacks of wood. The space was small but sturdy. A single, grimy window near the ceiling let in a sliver of daylight, but it was barred shut. They settled in, barricading the hatch above with heavy boxes and planks. Mark crouched by a rusted metal cabinet and pulled open its doors. Inside were some canned goods, enough for a few days, and a flashlight with fresh batteries. He pocketed what he could carry. Lisa lit a candle she found on a shelf, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The atmosphere was tense. Outside, the pounding continued, a relentless reminder of the dangers beyond. Jamie sat close to Sarah, eyes wide. "Will they get in?" Sarah kissed his forehead softly. "No, sweetheart. We're safe here." But Mark wasn't so sure. Suddenly, from somewhere deeper within the basement, a soft, almost inaudible scratching echoed. Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" Lisa whispered. Mark motioned for silence and grabbed the flashlight. He crept toward a dark corner where the sound seemed to come from. There, partially hidden by a stack of crates, was a narrow doorway, half open. The scratching grew louder, accompanied now by faint whispering. Mark hesitated, then pushed the door open fully. Inside was a small storage room, but at its far end, a figure lay huddled. It was a man, ragged, gaunt, and shaking. His eyes flickered open, reflecting fear and confusion. Who are you?" Mark asked cautiously. The man coughed weakly. "Name's Greg. I've been trapped here for days. I was hiding when everything changed." Lisa knelt beside him, offering a bottle of water. "What happened to the town? To the people?" Greg swallowed hard. "The sickness, it spread faster than anyone expected. The infected, they didn't just attack. They hunted. They adapted. The town fell silent because no one was left to make noise. They picked us off one by one." Mark nodded grimly. "That's what we've seen." Greg looked around nervously. "There's something else, beneath this town. Something worse than the infected." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" Greg swallowed again. "Tunnels, old mining shafts. People used to say they were abandoned, but after the outbreak, creatures started appearing in them. Not like the infected. Different. Faster. Smarter. And they come up to hunt at night." Ellie shivered. "We're in the heart of dead America, aren't we?" "More than that," Greg whispered. "We're trapped on top of a nightmare." The pounding on the hatch suddenly intensified, rattling the floor beneath their feet. Mark stood and braced himself. "They're not going away." Lisa glanced around the basement, eyes sharp. "We can't stay here long. We need a plan to move, either through the tunnels Greg mentioned or back to the surface." Mark looked at the family. "What choice do we have?" Sarah wrapped an arm around Jamie and Ellie. "We survive. Together." As night deepened outside, the family prepared for whatever horrors lurked in the darkness, knowing that staying silent wasn't an option. The world might have fallen silent, but their fight was just beginning. End of Part 4. The basement was thick with tension as the family and their new companion, Greg, prepared to descend even further, into the forgotten tunnels beneath Pine Hollow. The pounding on the hatch above hadn't stopped, the creatures outside were relentless, their hunger unwavering. Mark checked his shotgun, now reloaded with the few remaining shells, and tightened his grip on the crowbar. Lisa gathered a few supplies, canned food, water, a dusty old map she'd found folded in the cabinet. Greg pointed to a crude drawing on the map. "This shows the old mining tunnels beneath the town. There's an entrance here, not far from the cabin. It's narrow, but it could lead us to safety, or at least away from the infected." Sarah took Jamie's hand, trying to mask her fear. Ellie clung close to Mark. The family was counting on him to keep them alive. "Let's move," Mark said quietly. The group made their way back up the ladder, eyes and ears alert for any sign of the creatures. The pounding had softened, but that only meant the danger had shifted. Outside, dusk was falling. Shadows stretched long across the forest floor as the family hurried toward the tunnel entrance Greg had described. The air smelled damp and earthy, mixed with decay. The narrow opening was barely visible behind overgrown bushes and fallen branches. Greg crouched low and slipped inside, the others following cautiously. Inside, the tunnel was tight and dark. Ellie switched on her flashlight, the beam piercing the blackness ahead. The air was cool and stale, carrying whispers of forgotten lives. For a moment, the silence was comforting. Then a faint sound echoed, soft footsteps, distant but growing closer. "Not alone," Greg muttered. Mark raised the shotgun, heart pounding. The family huddled together as shapes began to emerge from the shadows, slightly different from the creatures outside. Faster, more coordinated. Lisa gripped a metal pipe, ready to fight. "We have to keep moving." The narrow passage forced them into a line, one after the other, every footstep sounding like thunder. Suddenly, the tunnel split into two paths. Greg paused, pointing to the right. "This way," he said. "It's longer, but safer. The other path opens into the old town center, that's where most of the infected gather." They took the right fork, pushing deeper underground. The walls glistened with moisture, and the ground was uneven beneath their feet. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the left passage. The creatures had found the other way. "We're lucky," Mark whispered, but the family knew luck was fleeting. Hours seemed to pass as they moved slowly, alert for every sound. Then, Ellie's flashlight caught something, a faint glow coming from ahead. "Light," she said softly. They emerged into a large cavern, illuminated by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the rocky walls. The eerie glow gave the space an otherworldly beauty, but the family had no time to admire it. Greg led them toward a rusted metal door embedded in the rock face. "This was an old maintenance entrance," he explained. "If it still works, it might lead us outside the town, to safety." Mark stepped forward and pushed the door. It groaned open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling upward. The family ascended cautiously, the air growing fresher with each step. Hope stirred within them, fragile but real. At the top, they found themselves in an abandoned subway station, graffiti-covered walls, flickering lights, and an eerie silence that stretched like a weight. "Almost there," Greg said. "If we can get to the surface, we can find a way out of dead America." But as they moved toward the exit, the faint sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Mark spun around, gun raised, as a figure appeared, a man, ragged but uninfected. "Wait," the stranger called. "I'm with the survivors." Relief and suspicion warred in Mark's mind. In a world gone silent, trust was the rarest thing of all. End of Part 5. Would you like me to continue with Part 6? The stranger's eyes darted nervously between the family and Greg, his clothes tattered but his stance steady. Mark kept the shotgun trained on him, every muscle coiled, ready. "I'm Daniel," the man said quickly, raising his hands. "I'm part of a survivor group nearby. We heard noise down here and came to check." Sarah whispered to Mark, "Can we trust him?" Mark's jaw tightened. In dead America, trust was as rare as a clear sky. But they couldn't afford to turn away every possible ally. "We're not looking for trouble," Mark said finally. "But if you're with survivors, maybe you can help us." Daniel nodded. "We're trying to hold out in the old library, a few blocks from here. Safe from the infected and other dangers." Lisa frowned. "Other dangers?" Daniel glanced over his shoulder, lowering his voice. "There are people who don't want the world to rebuild. They've gone rogue, desperate, violent. sometimes worse than the infected themselves. Ellie swallowed hard. The world outside wasn't just overrun by monsters. Fear had taken many forms. Mark motioned them forward. Lead the way. But any sign of betrayal, and we fight. The group moved cautiously through the empty subway tunnels, the flickering lights casting long shadows. After what felt like hours, they emerged near the surface. The city loomed, cracked and crumbling, overgrown with wild vines and empty streets. Daniel led them through back alleys and ruined storefronts, eyes sharp for any movement. Jamie clung to Sarah's hand, whispering, "Are we safe now?" Sarah forced a smile. "We're getting closer." They arrived at the old library, a sturdy stone building with boarded-up windows and makeshift barricades. Inside, a small group of survivors greeted them warily. Children huddled in corners, elders sat quietly, and armed men and women patrolled the rooms. Mark introduced the family and Greg, explaining their journey. A woman stepped forward, tall, with steely eyes and a commanding presence. "I'm Rachel," she said. "We're glad to see new faces, but trust is earned here." Mark nodded. "We understand. We've been running from infected and worse for days." Rachel studied them, then offered a nod. "We have food, water, and shelter. But we also have rules. No one leaves without a reason, and everyone contributes." Lisa glanced around. "How do you deal with threats?" Rachel's expression hardened. "With force, if needed. We protect each other. But sometimes, the danger comes from inside." Ellie shivered. "Like who?" Rachel didn't answer directly. The tension in the room was palpable. That night, the family settled into a small room upstairs. The walls were thin, and every creak outside made their hearts race. Mark sat on the cot, cleaning the shotgun. Sarah made sure Jamie was asleep, while Ellie stared out the window at the ruined city. Suddenly, a distant scream shattered the uneasy calm. The group rushed outside to find a survivor cornered by infected near the library entrance. Mark and Daniel fought them off, clearing the threat. But the attack raised urgent questions. "Someone let them in," Rachel said grimly. "This was no accident." Mark's eyes narrowed. "We need to find out who." Over the next day, tensions rose. Accusations flew quietly behind closed doors. Trust fractured as fear gnawed at the edges of the survivors' fragile peace. Lisa approached Mark privately. "We can't survive if we don't stick together. But someone here is hiding something." Mark agreed. "We'll keep watch. No one slips past us again." That night, while the others slept, Mark heard soft footsteps outside their door. He grabbed the shotgun and opened it slowly. There, in the shadows, stood Daniel, his face pale, eyes shadowed. "Mark, we have a problem," Daniel whispered urgently. "There's a group within the survivors planning to take control, and they see us as a threat." Mark's heart sank. In a world fallen silent, the loudest danger often came from those claiming to protect you. End of Part 6. Mark's grip tightened on the shotgun as Daniel's whispered words echoed in the darkened room. A group within the survivors, planning to take control. Sarah stirred, waking at the tension in Mark's voice. He motioned for silence. Daniel continued, "They've been sabotaging supplies, spreading rumors to divide us, and now they want to get rid of anyone who opposes them." Lisa's face hardened. "We need to act fast. If they're planning a coup, we can't let it happen." Mark nodded grimly. "We'll keep this quiet for now. No need to cause panic. We find the leaders and stop them." The next morning, the family moved carefully through the library's cramped corridors, watching and listening. Everyone seemed tense, eyes flicking with suspicion. Greg stayed close, his experience a valuable asset. As the day wore on, Mark spotted two survivors whispering near the supply room, an older man named Harris and a woman called Eva. Their furtive glances and hushed tones stood out. Mark approached quietly, overhearing snatches of their conversation. "They don't suspect us yet. The shipment tonight will seal it." Mark exchanged a glance with Daniel, who nodded grimly. That night, the family and Daniel prepared to intercept the shipment, a crate of food and medicine arriving from outside. The group hid near the loading dock as the crate was wheeled in. But as the delivery began, Harris and Eva slipped away from the main group, heading toward the storage rooms. Mark signaled to Daniel and Lisa. "Follow them." They trailed Harris and Eva to a hidden cellar beneath the library. Inside, flickering lanterns revealed a cache of stolen supplies and weapons. "We're not alone in this fight," Eva hissed to Harris. "Once we have the supplies, the others will have no choice but to follow." Mark's blood ran cold. This was a power grab, a dangerous game that could destroy the fragile sanctuary they'd found. The family backed away silently, returning to the others. The next day, Mark confronted Rachel with the evidence. She listened, expression unreadable. "I suspected some unrest," she admitted. "But proof makes this real. We can't let them tear us apart." Together, they devised a plan to expose Harris and Eva at the next meeting. But that night, the library was attacked, from inside. Harris and Eva's supporters struck suddenly, wielding stolen weapons and catching many off guard. Chaos erupted. Screams echoed through the hallways as the fight turned deadly. Mark grabbed Sarah and Jamie, pushing Ellie and Lisa ahead. Daniel covered their retreat with a makeshift barricade. "Move! We can't hold here!" Mark shouted. They fled through hidden passages Greg had discovered earlier, leading to an old underground sewer system. The damp tunnels echoed with distant shouts and crashing footsteps behind them. As they ran, Ellie stumbled, nearly falling into the dark water below. Mark caught her just in time. "We can't stop now," he urged. "We have to get out." The family pressed forward, the oppressive darkness closing in. Ahead, a faint light flickered, a glimmer of hope. They burst out into the fresh air, breathing deep the cold night. But safety was still far away. Behind them, the ruined library burned, a stark reminder that in dead America, threats came from both the living and the shadows within. End of Part 7. Shall I continue with Part 8 to bring this intense story to its conclusion? The flames from the burning library cast flickering shadows across the ruined streets as Mark and his family stumbled into the open night air. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, the acrid smell of smoke filling their lungs, but for the first time in days, they were free of the immediate threat. Behind them, the sanctuary they had briefly called home was nothing more than a blazing ruin, consumed by betrayal and violence. The fight for survival had taken an unexpected turn, one they hadn't anticipated but had faced with grim determination. Sarah pulled Jamie close, shielding him from the cold night wind. Ellie's eyes, wide with exhaustion, searched the horizon for any sign of safety. Lisa moved beside Mark, ever vigilant. Daniel, battered but unbroken, scanned the empty streets. "We can't stay here. The rogue faction will hunt us down." Mark nodded. "We need to find a place where the past can't catch up with us. Somewhere safe, or as safe as anywhere can be now." The family moved cautiously through the quiet town, each step weighed with uncertainty but driven by hope. They navigated broken roads, abandoned vehicles, and shattered storefronts, remnants of a world that once was. Hours passed as dawn crept slowly over the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. In the distance, Mark spotted a small hill dotted with trees. "Up there," he said. "We can get a better view and plan our next move." The climb was slow and difficult, but the family helped each other along, their bond a steady light amid the darkness. Reaching the summit, Mark peered over the landscape. The town lay behind them, ruined but silent. Ahead, the forest stretched endlessly, promising refuge but also unknown dangers. We'll keep moving, Mark said firmly. We'll find others like us, survivors who still believe in a future. Sarah smiled faintly. We're alive. That's what matters. Ellie looked up at him. Do you think the world will ever be the same? Mark shook his head. No. But maybe it can be better, built on hope, trust, and the strength we have now. As the sun rose higher, the family gathered their few belongings and began the descent into the forest. The path was uncertain, but their resolve was clear. They walked into the dawn of a new day, one where the silence had finally been broken by the promise of survival and the courage to face whatever came next. The end. Would you like me to help you with anything else for your zombie audiobook content? Maybe some title ideas or image prompts?